As flies to wanton boys are we to the gods, they kill us for their sport. The famous King Lear quote explores the inequitable nature of the world in which we live. But what parallels does this have to Formula 1, a microcosm of society filled with money, privilege, and power? Such as its bargaining power across the world, F1 is arguably one of the gods of which the passage refers to. It extracts great sums of money from the world's biggest sporting promoters, governments, and businesses for the privilege of hosting 20 speedy technological triumphs around a circuit. Of course, the usual offset is to recoup that investment with ticket sales, a revenue stream that has been impacted greatly by the current global health crisis. For 2022, F1's answer to that has been to expand its calendar to 23 races. Previously, F1 had sought to avoid triple headers after the France, Austria, Great Britain back-to-back-to-back burned out a number of key staff in 2018. And it was a wholly exhausting experience if you were simply working in the paddock at the time, so one cannot fathom how draining it was for the part of the championship fraternity that never sleeps. Teams have to pack up and ship out on the Sunday night, drive to the next venue and set up again. To do this 3 weeks in a row requires the endeavour of a superhero, and yet it goes unsung. One marvels at the team's motorhomes along with their sartorial flair and the ever-escalating size, but rarely does one stop to applaud those who build them numerous times a year. It was agreed that F1 would avoid triple headers after that. The 2019 season featured none, but the need to get a 15-plus race calendar together amid the pandemic last year did sadly necessitate 3 groups of triple headers to kick off the season with, followed by another to close the season. But having been under lockdown for months, it probably wasn't a bad thing last year. But as the world begins to tiptoe toward normality, then attitudes will be different this time around. Maybe there's a free pass for 2021 with COVID still presenting a hurdle to overcome, but for 2022, however, there really shouldn't be any triple headers at all. But instead, F1 has decided to compress a 23 race calendar between March and November. After the summer break, there will be 2 triple headers on the bounce, presenting a run of 6 races in 7 weeks. Spa, Zandvoort and Monza make up the first, with travel time a little bit easier between the 3 rounds. Sochi, Singapore and Suzuka afterwards is a lot less easy to swallow. There's also the 7 double headers to satisfy the dream of getting the season done before December. The Bahrain-Saudi Arabia doubleheader at the start makes logistical sense, as do Silverstone in Austria and the France-Hungary doubles. But the Azerbaijan-Canada and the season-ending Brazil-Abu Dhabi back-to-backs make little sense in that regard. 20 years ago, the calendar was pegged at 16 and 17 races. Now there's 6 or 7 extra rounds in far-flung places to contend with. That's 6 or 7 fewer weeks spent with family and loved ones, 6 or 7 extra weeks toiling away instead of indulging in the finer things that life has to offer. But for the sake of balance, let's consider the contrary argument, and it's one that pops up a lot on social media. If you don't like the F1 calendar, get another job. But the thing is, that's what people are looking to. A 23 race calendar is too much for many of those who work in F1, let alone for those with families. Soon it's going to present a situation where F1 teams are coping with a large turnover in staff, simply because a couple of years of colossal calendars will create too much of a strain. Although the dream for many people is to work in F1, it risks becoming the adage of don't meet your heroes, and it could prove to be a poison chalice if you don't wish to spend weeks on the road. And so it becomes difficult for teams to find those willing to make the commitment for numerous years. 4-time champion Sebastian Vettel has been outspoken about the growth of the calendar in recent weeks, saying that not only should F1 recognise that the people working in the championship should get more time to themselves, but the increasing number of races will make each one less special. When F1 calendars were smaller, the anticipation for the next round was greater. Each race felt like an event, but now races feel nothing more than a commodity for rich promoters to buy and sell. It's simply a case that if you have the money to spend on an F1 race, then you can get one. For the plaudits that Liberty Media scooped up after purchasing the rights to the championship from Bernie Ecclestone, it seems that there's less of a discerning eye when it comes to who F1 accepts money from. Liberty has spoken of potentially expanding the F1 calendar to 25 races, which would not only further dilute each race, but extend the periods of time where people working in F1 are away from home. With budget caps in place too, the options for teams to rotate personnel working at events will also be severely limited. F1 must consider people over profits at some point. Thus, that circles back to the Earl of Gloucester's lamentations in King Lear. The unsung heroes of F1, those who work hardest to put on a show, are treated as mere flies to the wanton boys in the boardroom, and that can't be a sustainable situation for anyone. F1's management, as the gods who rule the paddock, have the chance to change that, and it begins with realising that less is sometimes more. If the calendar shrinks in size in the future, then so be it. Reward those who labour hardest with a chance to rest.